Good morning, everyone. My name is Omaguni. As you can see, I'm physically disabled. Just before my birth, due to a premature placental abruption, certain regions of my brain suffered from hypoxia. And because of that incident, I move now with a powered wheelchair which I'm controlling with my right foot, and I can speak before you right now with my eye gaze-enabled AAC device. Although I face challenges on multiple fronts, I find the challenge of communication one of the most prominent ones. Communication is crucial for every individual, however, I don't think that it would be an exaggeration to say that this is particularly the case for people with severe physical disabilities. This is because these people, including myself, are highly dependent on other people to put it bluntly, continue living. Except for breathing, I need a caregiver to do things to sustain my life. I need to be able to communicate with my caregivers to maintain bodily autonomy. I need to be able to choose what I want to eat, what I want to wear, where I want to go, and so on. To do all of this, to have social interactions and participate in society, being able to communicate as effectively as possible is crucial. This is the reason why I'm constantly looking for ways to improve how efficient I can communicate, and this was so even during my childhood. I had the luck to go to a school that had the main objective to make each student as independent as possible. In my case, they quickly realized that I had the will and the mental capacity to take every opportunity they would put before me. After trying things out, they noticed that I had relatively good control over my right foot, and thus we began training so that I could control a powered wheelchair with it. When I was around 7, I could comfortably use my wheelchair to go anywhere I want. The next challenge was communication. Before I had my wheelchair, I relied heavily on gestures and pointing to express myself. That changed when I learned to read and write, giving me the possibility to spell out keywords. With my new wheelchair, I had also the ability to control a Windows PC via its joystick. I could type in a Word document with an on-screen keyboard, one letter at a time, around 1 to 3 words per minute. Although this was extremely slow and very exhausting, this was actually a very big step towards more independence, because it was the very first time that I could independently express myself without the need of someone sitting next to me, and guessing what I wanted to say. This had made it clear that I would hugely benefit from an AAC device. For the next 8 years I used my AAC device mounted on my wheelchair and an AAC software called Mind Express. With that setup I could type 3 to 6 words per minute. However, possibly because I was getting older and had more things to say about an increasing number of topics, I slowly became dissatisfied about how slow I typed, and I began looking for alternative methods of typing. I first stumbled upon a piece of software called Dasher. Dasher is a widely unique piece of software that has the most original way of typing. Due to time concerns I will not go into depth about how Dasher works today, but I would highly recommend that you Google it when you have time. The key thing for me was that I had more or less doubled my speed of typing, and on top of that it required less energy to do this. And after using Dasher for 2 or 3 years, I finally discovered eye tracking. This was for me another big leap forward in terms of efficient communication. With eye tracking I could type much faster on average while using drastically less energy. Currently with eye gaze I am able to type between 15 to 20 words per minute. 17 words per minute on average is blazingly fast for me when you consider from where I started, but on absolute terms it's still very slow, if you consider that an average conversation between 2 individuals is around 150 words per minute. In other words, you can say that I get approximately 9 times fewer the chance to express my thoughts compared to a person who could speak verbally. This has various effects, from people not to get to know me properly, to me needing to make a choice what is important enough to say and what not. From childhood on I thought about BCIs. How easy it would be to have a top hat. For some reason I would always imagine the BCI device as a top hat, that I can put on to talk using only my thoughts. Those around me would jokingly argue that I would have no secrets if I used such a device, because it would say everything that I would think. As a child I found that type of argument a bit silly, because as a communication device, it would have some way differentiating between thoughts I wanted to voice and thoughts I did not wanted to voice. right? So, to this day my main objective was always to type as fast as possible. But with the emergence of BCI, I possibly need to make a consideration between more speed or more agency. As I pondered about this dilemma, I realized that this is not the first time that I needed to make that consideration. As I grew up with my AAC device, I preferred to communicate with a text-based system rather than with symbols, so I could be in control over what I would say. Or I would add new quick-fire messages myself rather than letting my speech pathologist do it. Like I mentioned before, people with physical disabilities need to communicate to have bodily autonomy, but when the user has no agency over his or her communication, the main objective of communication would have failed. Although BCIs have potential on multiple fronts, they even say that BCIs could possibly straight-up cure damage in the brain. I want to focus on what it can mean for the communication of someone who cannot speak. A BCI-enabled AAC device could provide the ability to communicate and gain, or regain more independence for people that can't use any current AAC solution. In my mind, the holy grail of AAC BCI devices would be a BCI that enables the user to speak with their thoughts at or around the speed of an average conversation. To achieve this, it has to automatically be able to differentiate between the user's inner thoughts and the user's thoughts that are meant for communication. I'm not sure if we ourselves can differentiate between these types of thoughts, so possibly it's something that both the BCI and the user must learn. So, in my opinion, the BCI should be able to differentiate between inner thoughts and thoughts that are meant for communication. But it is very important that the BCI can do this 100% accurately every time. Otherwise, the user would not be in control of what he or she says, and that would not be acceptable for an AAC device. And I can't stress this enough, the whole reason, the ultimate goal of AAC is to give someone who cannot speak through conventional means, aka speaking, a way to communicate with others, to enable them to have bodily autonomy and to participate in society. To achieve this, the user needs to be able to communicate intentionally and independently. If the AAC device does not enable to do this, then we cannot classify this device as an AAC device. I repeat myself, but this is really a crucial point. I'm not a bioengineer, nor a neurologist, so I have no clue if this differentiation between inner thoughts and thoughts that are to be uttered would be feasible at all. But if it is feasible, we are several generations of BCI removed, I think. In the meantime, we need to find other ways to make sure that the user has complete agency of his AAC BCI. The main problem we have to solve, like I mentioned, is how we can let the device know which thought to utter. One solution would be to have a send switch. This could be a physical button that the user can press to speak his or her next thought. This is relatively simple to implement, I think, but this would exclude users who have not the ability to press a button. A little more advanced way to give the user agency could be to require looking at certain patterns that is placed somewhere in their surroundings. This could be a symbol that is placed on their wheelchair, for example, and when the user looks at that, the BCI begins uttering the current thought of the user. The same thing could be achieved with a bracelet around their arm. A disadvantage of this solution is that in this case the user will not be able to make eye contact with the recipient, which will lead to even less natural conversations. Instead of physical buttons or patterns, the BCI could be programmed to wait for a specific thought to start speaking, like how you would wake Siri by saying the wake words, "Hey Siri." Just like this, the BCI could require wake thoughts to be activated. This would be more accessible. However, then the question arises, when does the BCI stop speaking? Maybe it would be possible to have a basic language model which the BCI could use to know what words and sentences are. Then the user could literally think, BCI, I want to speak out the next 2 sentences, for example. Or we could think what other things we do while conversing with someone. For example, when we talk to someone, we usually look in that person's eyes, isn't it? That and other related signals could help to determine if a thought must be uttered or not. All these ways to determine if the thought is to be uttered could fail. The user could, for example, accidentally press the physical button, or accidentally think of the wake thoughts, or look in someone's eyes without intending to say anything. To ensure the user's complete agency, there should be fail-safes in place. One fail-safe could be that the BCI waits a certain amount of time before uttering the thought of the user, so that the user has a chance to cancel it. It would be also helpful to have the ability to stop an uttering while it's been spoken. Right now, it happens to me time to time that I accidentally glance at the speak button in the software that I'm using, and then my device starts reading the message that I have not finished yet. When this happens, I'm a little embarrassed, of course, but because the prematurely spoken out message was intended to be heard by others anyway, and the fact that I can quickly stop it, it's not a big deal. This is however not the case with BCIs, as it has access to your own thoughts, which it can utter. A small side note here, these ideas are my personal ideas and so others can have different opinions. I think it is always better to provide as much customization as possible to make the device suit better for each individual. I held a simple questionnaire between a few of my peers. It was a sample size of about 20 and everybody but one had already an AAC device. The most unsurprising fact was they all found agency more important than the speed with which they could communicate. Even with an error rate of 5%, most of them would not consider using the device. What I expected to see less is that quite a few of them are hesitant to at all consider using a device which will have access to their thoughts, even if the device worked perfectly. Privacy is very important, and the thought that a device would have access to their own thoughts sounded very dystopic to a lot of people. But this may be because BCI is yet an alien concept to them. When some people start using a BCI device in their daily life, I expect that more people will consider using it themselves. People may also be less willing to use an implanted BCI versus a non-invasive one. Interestingly, the person who has no AAC device due to their financial situation, they communicated with me via their smartphone, was a lot more open to use a BCI device, even if it meant the device would utter their inner thoughts occasionally. I don't know what you all think, but I see a huge red flag here. This could mean that people who have no established AAC solution are more willing to waiver their agency to have a way of communicating. This could create double standards in BCI, where the standards for people who have already an established way of communicating are higher than of those who don't have ways of communicating. This feels very wrong to me. So, in conclusion, BCI-enabled AAC devices could be the key for a lot of people to communicate more efficiently, and for some it may be the only way to communicate. To make sure that users can communicate without having to make compromises on their privacy or their bodily autonomy, it is of utmost importance to provide the companies and other entities who do research on this field with ethical guidelines. These guidelines should be centered around consent, agency, and privacy. For this reason, I want to thank the BCI Society for hosting this conference, and everybody who organized this workshop specifically. Thank you all for listening to me. And, if you ever need a test subject to test a non-invasive BCI in or around Belgium, or for any other question of course, please feel free to reach out to me.